This episode contains material that may be triggering to some individuals. Please check the show notes for more information and be mindful of your own mental health and comfort levels. Hey podcasters, are you tired of endlessly searching for the perfect guest for your show? Well, look no further. Podmatch is the ultimate platform for connecting podcast hosts with guests. Whether you're a seasoned podcaster looking for fresh voices or an expert wanting to share your knowledge, Podmatch has got you covered. It's kind of like a dating site for podcasts. With Podmatch's advanced algorithm, finding your perfect match is just a few clicks away. Simply create your profile, specify your interests, and let Podmatch do the rest. You'll be matched with guests or hosts who align with your interests in no time. To get started today, visit www.joinpodmatch.com/Quiet Connection Podcast and start making meaningful connections that will take your podcast to the next level. Welcome to Quiet Connection, a podcast dedicated to ending the stigma surrounding perinatal mental health. I'm Chelsea. Today, I'm speaking with Foster, a postpartum doula, filmmaker, and mother whose story embodies the power of surrender. From navigating a cesarean birth, a VBAC, and enduring unimaginable loss, Foster found a way to honor her son Wilde and transform her pain into power. This conversation is heavy, but it's also full of light, love, and the reminder that even in our darkest moments, beauty still finds a way in. Here's Foster. Hello. Today I'm here with Foster. Foster, how are you?
I'm so great. Thanks, Chelsea, for having me on your show.
I am so excited to connect with you finally. I feel like I've been saying that a lot lately, but life has been lifing for a
It
lot of
has
us.
been. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Um,
know.
so I'm just really thankful to have you, and I'm thankful to share some space with you today. I would absolutely love it if you could introduce yourself to my listeners and let us know who was Foster before Foster was a mom.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. My name is Foster Wilson. I am currently a postpartum doula and a mom, of course. But before I was a mom, I I was at that time in my life deep in the arts. I was an actor and starting to be a filmmaker as well. And I was very much a busy person, I will say. I was a go, go, go. I would say I was in my masculine energy a lot. I was very someone who liked to accomplish a lot of things, was very driven, career driven, life driven, just like interested in um, accomplishing so much and getting really far in life. So I'd made a lot of big, bold choices and big moves across the country and to new places and things. And I think, in motherhood, a lot of things shifted and slowed me down, and in positive and negative ways, right? As there are two sides to everything. Yeah, that's where I was before.
Yeah. And now,
Yeah.
and yeah, like you said, you're a postpartum doula now, and you're doing a lot of work in that area, which is, we love doulas. We always,
Yeah.
I always talk about how, like, there's not a lot of, we don't endorse things or we won't say that, but I say to everyone, find a doula, find a
Mhm.
postpartum doula. You guys are doing work that I can't summarize in a sentence. Like,
Mhm.
what you do for families is, I wish I had a doula. So that
Yeah.
that's just my
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I get chills when I hear that because I actually see it as I'm such an honor to be able to be invited into people's homes and their spaces, and it's such a vulnerable time. I think it's deeply, deeply personal work. It's which we can get into. There is grief in postpartum for everyone, and it. I'm every single time I have the honor of working with a family, I just feel very grateful that they have chosen me to be in that space. And I think that if anyone who is looking for a doula, it's so important that you have a deep connection and that you really fit that person. No matter their experience, no matter how many births they've served, if they're doing birth, or how many families they've served, do you connect with them? Do you feel safe opening up to them? Because that is really the way that you're going to be supported the best, is if you trust that person.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and then we could talk about doulas all day and doula work, but I wanna talk I wanna talk about you, and I wanna talk about your journey because it's complex and there's lots of layers. Let's start with one of the most mundane questions I will ask you today.
Mhm.
Did you always envision yourself being a mother?
It's a great question. I really did. I knew it in theory when I was a kid and a teenager. I had always been a caretaker, a nanny, a babysitter in my teenage years. Nannying was what I did in college to support myself, and the work that I did for up until about a year and a half, 2 years before I had my first child. I was working with children. And when I met the person who became the father of my children, I did know with that person, like, yes, this is who I want to have children with. And it became more concretized once I met him, that this was definitely in our future. And we met quite young. We were 19 at the time, and so we did everything a bit faster than I would say, or earlier than I would say. A lot of my friends, we I live in New York, I live in LA now, so a lot of people had children much later in life. We were earlier to the game, I guess. I was 28 when I had my first child. So, yeah, it definitely was something I knew I wanted, and I knew I needed a break from children for a little while before I had my own. Yeah.
I can absolutely relate and also validate too, like, the timeline kind of just becomes what it is, right? Like,
Mhm.
you just kind of we have these grand plans and then things just happen the way they happen. So let's walk through that journey
Yeah.
to your first pregnancy. Talk to me a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, my first pregnancy actually happened quite easily. Fortunately, we planned it. I think we got pregnant quite quickly, and that pregnancy was really smooth for up until about week 36. So I was with a midwife. I had gone deep into learning about natural birth and home birth. And so I had a midwife. We intended to have a home birth with my first. And I felt great. I loved being pregnant. I just was one of those people that had it on the quote unquote easier side at the time. Um, I wasn't too sick. I really enjoyed that. And I was, like I mentioned, the first of all my friends to have a baby. So it was kind of new and that was exciting. And we got to week 36 or so and found out that my baby was breech, which we didn't know because we had been under a midwifery model of care. And the way she had felt the baby, she really just thought baby was head down, but she wasn't. And so
Yeah.
our first appointment with a backup OB had this ultrasound and was like kind of totally thrown by that. Spent a long time doing naturopathic work to try to, spinning babies, try to turn her, and a version, which was really, really painful. Um, and the version is a manual turning of the baby, and she would rotate, rotate, rotate about a quarter of a clock, and then pop right back into place where she wanted to be. So that was kind of we were under this turmoil trying to figure out what to do and considering a home birth with a breech delivery, but maybe not feeling comfortable. And then I started to itch in my hands and my feet. And I remember texting my midwife at 11 o'clock at night, and thank goodness she replied right away. And she said, "That is not normal. You need to see your OB in the morning." Because what I ended up being diagnosed with was cholestasis of the liver, which is a pretty rare condition. It manifests in this extreme itching, especially late at night, especially in the hands and the feet. And it's very uncomfortable. But they checked my bile acid levels and they were quite high. And so at this point, we were 37 weeks or so, and they said, "Baby's full term. We need to induce. You need to have this baby now because her life is going to be at risk the later you go." And that was really hard because I knew at that point I cannot have an induction and a delivery of a breech baby vaginally. So the only way would be to have a cesarean.
Yeah.
And I remember grieving that with my midwife in her office and just really having to let go of all of my planned outcomes here and all the things I really wanted for myself. And of course, a cesarean for me was kind of last on the list. But we did go forward with that and had a very smooth cesarean birth with my first child. And she was, you know, 38 and a half weeks at that point, healthy, and things went pretty smoothly after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still quite the transition.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a huge shift from what you had envisioned. But and I don't like, the immediate thought that comes to mind is like, "Oh, well, thankfully, it went smoothly," but
Mhm.
that still does not take away from, like you said, like, there is a grieving process of
Yeah.
that. You grieve the birth that you wanted and that you expected. Did that impact those early days of transitioning into motherhood?
From what I recall, you know, it must have.
Yeah.
But I do think I remember what I remember so vividly is the moment that I was grieving, the really taking that time with my midwife for her to sit and honor and hold space for as long as we needed to grieve and her to really tell me you need to grieve the loss of what you wanted. And she didn't let me gloss over it, you know?
Mm,
So I think that set me up for more of a quote unquote success, right? In postpartum. Like it set me up better than had I just tried to kind of muscle my way. Oh, at least we have modern medicine. And, all of those things are true. And I need to grieve the loss of what happened for me. And yeah, and the interesting thing was I had my placenta encapsulated, and the doula that did that took a picture of it, and she came to me and she said, "Look at this placenta. You actually had a vein on the outside of the placenta. And so if you had had a trial of labor, your baby could have kicked this and you could have bled out."
wow.
And I found that out within 24 hours of giving birth. And so I immediately had this shift of perspective of like, okay, everything sort of happened for the reason that it happened. And now I tell my daughter, like, you saved my life by staying breech because right, you really she loves that story. But yes, but I was no longer angry at the situation. I felt like so grateful that I had just let it surrender to the process.
Yeah, and that's something, so I again, like, I don't like to do a lot of research on my guests beforehand because I really, really like to get to know you in the moment, but there are certain aspects of your story that I know, and a recurring theme for you is this surrender, and I know it's gonna come up again. So, I don't wanna feel like I'm hitting fast forward at all, but, like, just in terms of taking us along this journey, so you had the cesarean, and you kind of were settling into matrescence with this surrender and this
Mhm.
knowing of like, okay, this happened the way that it did, and we're right. And then when did you decide, okay, all right, I'm ready to do this again. Let's try this again.
I really couldn't. We knew we wanted 2 children. I really couldn't feel like it was possible until I would say my daughter was about 18 months. I could start to see the forest for the trees, like, oh, there's a world in which she's slightly more independent and isn't so on top of me all the time. I mean, I nursed her until she was 2.5. So we were very bonded. She needed a lot. It's hard to imagine having a newborn when you also have someone who's so dependent. The parents of Irish twins, I'm like, I bow down to you and twins. Um, but I so really when she started to get a little bit more independent, 18 months, 20 months, approaching 2, we decided we were ready to try for our second. And this this pregnancy also happened quickly. Maybe couple months, I don't remember exactly, and we were pregnant again. And very overjoyed, very happy. Our daughter was so healthy and beautiful. And like we were, there were definitely difficult moments, of course, but we were excited. And this time I wanted to be with my midwife again. I wanted to try for a VBAC. Kind of like I wanted a redo, like I wanted to have the birth experience that I wanted. So we were under a midwifery model of care again, and everything was going really well. We got to the 20-week ultrasound, and this was the first ultrasound that we had had. And because it was the first ultrasound, it's the anatomy scan of the baby. So the first ultrasound, I went in, and I had this moment where I thought something is maybe a little off, but maybe I'm just nervous because this is a big deal, and I don't know. But I couldn't shake this like something is off in this on this day. And we went into the appointment, and they started to do the scan technician, right, is doing the ultrasound, and is so quiet, not making small talk, completely silent. We're seeing a heartbeat. Everything looks good on our end. We're not like a little confused. And I said, "Is everything okay?" And the technician said, "The doctor will interpret the results." And my heart just sank. Then, of course, they have to finish the ultrasound. Doctor never comes in the room. We have to get all like clothes back on and everything. And they pull us into a side room, which was a counseling room. And the counselor explained to us that our baby had something called fetal hydrops, which manifested as fluid around the lungs and around the brain. And they showed us on the scan how there was all this black on the ultrasound, which was all liquid. And so essentially, he was very swollen. And this was obviously, we don't know what this meant. He's got a heartbeat. We don't, what does this mean? It felt very dire and very heavy, but like no one really told us what was going to happen. So we had an amniocentesis. We got the results of that. They said it's neither viral nor chromosomal. And we were like, we didn't know that was an option.
Yeah.
So essentially, they didn't know what was causing the swelling. And we went to a long list of neonatologists, and we were calling people in Chile, and we were trying to get to the bottom of it. It was just a very dark road. We probably went through 4 weeks of testing and uncertainty. And I remember at a certain point, again, going to my midwife, who just had become this maternal figure to me in this process. We were sitting outside of her little home and in the garden. And she said, "I think it just sounds like you need clarity." And I
Mm-hmm.
said, "Yes, that was it. I just don't have clarity." It was sitting in this uncertainty for so long. Like, is this child going to live? Is he not? And what do we do? And eventually we ended up with a wonderful neonatologist at Children's Hospital in Los Angeles who said, we've eliminated all of these options of what it could be. Down here at the bottom are these 3 things. There's no way to know for sure, but none of them are viable with life. And it was essentially a fatal diagnosis. He said it's the best case scenario is you make it to term, your baby is delivered, and he will live 2 to 3 weeks in the NICU. Best case scenario. Other choices, things that could happen is he could pass on his own during this time. But also, as you go on in this pregnancy, there's something called mirroring syndrome, and
Hmm.
your body could mirror his body. And because he's so swollen, you could become swollen or develop preeclampsia, which is obviously very dangerous. And it became clear that my life was a bit at risk here, had the potential to be more at risk. As badly as I wanted this choice to be in someone else's hands, I wanted wanted my son to make this choice for us, I wanted him to
Yeah.
just pass peacefully if that was his journey. And it felt like I was being asked to play God or whatever you want to call it, like I had too much control. I was being told, like, you can carry to term or you can terminate now. Um, so that was an excruciating decision to have to make. I was 24 weeks at the time. We did decide to terminate the pregnancy. In the state of California, it was written up as a fatal diagnosis, and it was totally fine acceptable to go to the local hospital, have induction and delivery, covered by my insurance. I am to this day so grateful that that was available to me because in different states at that time, in different states at this time, it would not have been. It would have been quite a difficult journey and probably an expensive journey, and maybe with practitioners that weren't as qualified. So I just want to name that because it's really, really, I didn't have to suffer in that way, and a lot of people do.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
I'm thankful that you brought that up because that was going to be something that I brought up too. Um, in that like you're saying, you wanted this decision to be someone else's. I think that that is something that is so relatable. And obviously no one, if you've never experienced loss or loss like this, it's not something that you can say like, "Oh, yeah, I imagine that must have been so hard."
for
Um,
sure.
but naming that naming that like you had just hoped that he would make the decision for you, and also acknowledging that you were also safe in making that choice at that time, and that it's not like that for a lot of
Yeah,
families because, yeah, it compounds an already impossible decision.
yeah, yeah,
So, I'm curious, like, you and your partner, obviously, you're going through all of these options. You're going through the options that are presented to you. How did you come to decide the path that you were going to take forward with your son?
yeah. The decision was twofold. What we said was the path of letting the path of letting him determine his own end date, which was could have been a pretty long path, looked like a lot of suffering.
Uh-huh.
It looked like suffering for him. I wasn't really clear on how painful that would be. One of the things about fetal hydrops, the reason why it's so detrimental is because we didn't know at what point the fluid started building up. And so it was pre 20 weeks, which means the pressure on his lungs would have meant that his lungs didn't develop past maybe 16 weeks, 18 weeks, we don't know. And I don't know what that kind of pain would have looked like for him. And then I look at my daughter and to say, the next few months are going to be just all of it. We were going to grieve no matter what, but it was just going to be a heavy grieving period of really uncertainty and then potentially hospital time and more confusion for her and just like a life of going back and forth to the hospital under what would have been the best case scenario, right? So it looked like a lot of suffering for everybody involved. And I know now, like it is in my world purview to eliminate suffering, right? To reduce the amount of suffering. So I didn't know that at the time, but I really did feel like that was a choice to reduce suffering. And um, and then the fact that my life was at risk, I didn't really in the moment care so much about that, quite honestly.
Yeah.
But my husband at the time, that he held on to that so tightly. And he could really see an vantage point that I couldn't because I felt like it was everything for my child, like everything for my child, right? But he held that vantage point of your life is at risk. I don't want anything to happen to you, anything to happen to you. Like, how would that affect our daughter, of course, and me, right? All
Yeah.
of the things. I, uh, I, I, p- I didn't put that at the top of my list of reasons, but it was very strongly at the top of his list for reasons why to terminate. And the fact that we didn't have to have this conversation of where would we have this done or how much would it cost because of this privilege we had of living in the state of California at the time, it those became the two primary reasons.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you brought up so many important points that I think a lot of people don't understand about this like, families who are forced into this decision. You have to think about children that you already have. You have to think about your future, their future, the suffering of you, the suffering of your child, not to take it to a I don't even think it's a political thing. I think it's a moral thing, but, like,
Mhm.
the ability to have that choice is a privilege, and I wish
Mhm.
that it was a privilege that was afforded to everyone.
Right. It's a matter of humanity.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
that's the word that I'm looking
Mhm.
for, and I'm not like you said, you're an open book, but you can absolutely not and you do not have to answer any questions that I have if it's uncomfortable, but are you able to sort of talk about what that process looked like once you made
Yeah.
that decision and
Absolutely.
how you were and, like, to take it a step further, I guess, like, how did you navigate it while also honoring not only your life, but your son's life in the process?
Yeah. I'm happy to talk about all of those details. I think it's really, really important if there's anyone who ends up listening to this and has to horrifically go through something like this, no one walks you through it really.
Mm-mm.
So the termination was scheduled. Um, it involved two parts. First, we went in for the termination, and that looks like a small medical office with a doctor, and they inject a needle in, much like an amniocentesis, right? Where they're pulling fluid, they're actually going in and they're injecting something into, I believe, I'm a little fuzzy because of the grief that happened at the moment, but I believe they inject something, the medication into the amniotic fluid. Um, if it goes into, I don't think it goes into like the baby itself. Correct me if I'm wrong at some point, but I think that's what it goes into the amniotic fluid, and it's I forget the name of the medicine, but there was a medicine that essentially at some point over the next 24 hours will stop his heart. So you do that appointment, and then you go home and come back in the next day for induction. And what I remember from that is this terrifying notion that at some point my son is going to pass and go from living to not living, and I don't know when that is. And I just remember my mom had come into town to take care of our toddler, and we were, I think, out to eat. And I remember being at the restaurant, just like out of body, out of mind, just thinking constantly, like, is now the moment that he's gone? Is now the moment? I'm the only person that knows him, feels him. I was huge in my second pregnancy, right? I was like, I was very, um, I could feel all his movements, right? And I just didn't know. And I never will know the moment that it happened. But the next day we went in, they check. So first they check the heartbeat to make sure there is not one, to make sure that he has passed. And then they begin the induction. And I had not had an induction before, but that is a lengthy process, especially at 24 weeks, your body's not really ready to go into labor. So can inductions are lengthy, right? Foley balloons and waiting for, everything to open and then eventually Pitocin. And I had made a decision at that time to not have an epidural because I wanted to feel the pain in my body the way that the pain in my heart was. I wanted it to match. I wanted a
Mhm.
physical representation of grief on the outside. And I stand by that choice because I think it helped me to feel. Um, there was a point when we were at 24 weeks. Okay. So there is a point before 24 weeks where this procedure might be a DNC
Mhm.
and you would go under and it would be, it would happen while you were asleep. And because of the 24 weeks is actually the cutoff really, where they switch it over to now it's going to be a vaginal delivery. But because he was so swollen, he was actually much heavier, bigger than he would have been at that time. So there was actually no choice in the matter. It was definitely going to be a vaginal delivery. So I just say that because depending on where the the gestation falls, it could be a different procedure. This was in the labor and delivery ward at UCLA. Um, and we were fortunate enough to have just an incredible labor and delivery team. They actually put a sign on the door that's kind of like a symbol for people coming into the room to know, don't walk in here with a happy face. Don't walk in here like, we're gonna have a baby today. Like,
Yeah.
you don't, just be mindful of what's happening here. And it was really difficult because there were people in labor, all around me, and you could hear babies crying. And it was very heavy, emotional, and just heavy is the best word to describe it. I had the full induction. At some point, I called my midwife because I felt like the pain was too much. I
Mm.
had endured too much and I was ready for an epidural, but I sort of felt like I needed her permission. I said, "Is it okay to
Yeah.
get the epidural now?" And she said, "Absolutely, of course. Like, yes, you can do anything you want." And then she ended up coming and supporting us, but kind of more like a doula because at that point, we were under the obstetric care. I don't recall how long the labor and delivery took, but it was within the day. It was like before the end of the day. We got in the morning, and before midnight that day, he was born. It so a baby at that size should be like a pound and a half. He was 3.5 pounds when he was born, which is to show you how swollen he was.
Yeah.
And I got to hold him, and we both did. And it was a very strange experience. And he just didn't look well. That was my first thought, 'cause he just really did he looks very sick.
Yeah.
Obviously, he had passed, but, like, he looked, like, unwell, and so it kind of that part helped a little bit to be like, "Oh, yeah, this baby was really sick," and kind of confirmed just all of this cerebral information I had received from the doctors. And, after about an hour or 2, we decided to be done with, holding him, and then you go through the process of, what they would do at the hospital is come in and talk to you about, are we doing cremation? Are we doing a burial? What are all of that process, which just shocked both of us. I don't think we realized that was happening. But we did decide to cremate him, and everything after that, I couldn't deal with. I just made my husband deal with it, of the, like, ashes and picking things up, and it was too much for me.
Yeah.
Um, and you have to leave the hospital without a baby, um, which is just so heavy and sad, and almost I felt almost a little embarrassed, even though I knew that's what was happening, like, to be leaving in this wheelchair, but with all these, like a box of baby
Yeah.
things instead of a baby. And I Yeah, and it was a time after that of really weird going back into motherhood and trying to be present with my daughter, trying to figure out how I was gonna, as you said, honor him, which the ways in which we honored him were we gave him a name. His name is Wilde with an E,
Mhm.
and we told everyone that was the way we honored him. We sent out cards of the day that he passed, and we framed it that we set him free,
Mhm.
and we mailed those out like a birth announcement card. I was very public on social media. I spoke my story. I continue to speak my story. I That is the way that I honor him, and by doing that, what ended up happening, I made that choice because there were and so many people that knew I was pregnant, and I didn't know the way to bridge the gap between they know I was pregnant, and now someday they're gonna run into me at the grocery store and say, "Where's your baby?" And
Yeah.
that is hard for me, but that is really hard for them, and awkward and uncomfortable, and, like, I didn't wanna make anybody go through that. So I tried to tell as many people as possible, like, a complete version of the story as I could share, so that you do with that information what you'd like, have your feelings or reach out or don't or protect yourself or whatever it is. And a lot of people ended up coming out of the woodwork to talk to me and share with me a story of loss that they had had that was sort of not as known, a miscarriage or something that they had kept private. And I was equally as honored in those moments to receive those kinds of stories. Um, because for whatever reason, they felt safe sharing with me because I had shared my story. And I think as human beings, share, as you know, like sharing our stories is sometimes all we have.
So you might, as you were telling that, you might have noticed my face get a little distracted, and I totally didn't intend that. But this, again, I don't know if this will mean anything to you or not. This is the second time this has ever happened. And the first time was with another lost mom. My computer just completely malfunctioned, like to the point where I was trying to make it as little notice to you as possible.
Mhm.
But what it's doing is it's pulling up a screen over and over again saying HP Dragonfly, HP Dragonfly, HP Dragonfly. And dragonflies in my life have always been visitors who have
Oh,
passed. And my this has never happened. Like I told you, this isn't my usual setup, but I've done lots of recordings on this laptop, and the only other time that this has happened was when I was talking to another lost mom.
wow.
Yeah, so I want at first, I wanted you to know, like, I was listening to you, but I was
Yeah.
also trying to not let my computer crash,
Yeah.
um, but also just again, if that doesn't speak to you or that doesn't resonate with you, then that's 100% fine. But for me, that like dragonflies have always been visitors who have passed, and so
Wow.
as you're wrapping up, like the feelings of coming out of the hospital, and there's so many things I want to say too, but and whether this
Wow.
stays in the episode or not, I can't count how many. There's like 20 tabs open right now that all just say HP Dragonfly.
Wow.
Yeah, so take that however
Beautiful.
it's
Yeah.
it's it's crazy. Like, I'm a little flabbergasted right now.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
I
so
love that.
there's
Thank you for sharing that with me. I appreciate that a lot.
well, I'm so glad. Well, and I also didn't want you to think, like, "What are they doing? Like, what are they looking at?" I was desperately like, "Don't crash, don't crash, don't crash," but
Yeah.
then I noticed what it was. I was like, "This is what it did," and this it's not like my computer needs to update or anything. I
Mm.
just did that. Yeah, it was about a month ago that I was talking to another lost mom, and it did the exact same thing. Um, so yeah, that's what I want to
Yeah.
highlight, though, in you sharing yours and Wilde's story, um, things that really stuck out to me were, 1, like, going back to the very beginning when you said you've always been this caretaker, you've always really, really cared deeply about caring for others, and to hear you say, "I know that's really hard for the person receiving the news,"
Mm.
um, just strikes me as like, "Oh my gosh," like, even when you are navigating something that is beyond something that most of us can comprehend, you're still thinking of others.
Mm.
You're still thinking of how other people are gonna receive this information.
Thank you.
I also I also love that you celebrated, or at least I don't maybe celebrated isn't the right word, but, like, you told the world about
Mm.
him and
Mhm.
that he was here, and I think that that's so beautiful, and that probably went a long way in terms of the process of I don't wanna say, like, the healing process, because I don't know if you're ever fully healed from something
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah.
but, I just think that's a really powerful decision that you made.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Yes, I was gonna say it I was really I was really almost desperate to find something positive out of the situation. And I want to caveat that by saying, like, no one owes anyone their story, right? Like,
Yeah.
you do, everybody does their own, has their own way of processing. And um, for whatever reason, the timing of how this happened, and I was so far along, there wasn't an option really to hide it. Um, but I was really, really searching for something good. I think in at my heart, I'm an optimist, and so I did have this. I had this experience with my first, where something went not according to plan, but then in the end, it was really the best thing that could have happened, right? So although I'll never be like, this was the right path, because I have this, fork in the road of what could have been that will always be there, but I really needed to find some kind of purpose for his life and his existence and for the heartbreak. And in doing that, and kind of just like, I was just kind of like spewing is not the right word, but I was just spreading this story in like messy bits and pieces. And the number of connections that has brought me to other people, other birthing people, other people who've lost, at various stages, a lot of parents, and a lot of people's grief that have nothing to do with parenthood. Just I have touched a very dark place in me, a very deep, dark place in the earth that I now have roots that go all the way down there. And I feel like I have blossomed really beautifully out of that because my roots are so deep, but I can see when other people's roots are that deep. I know when those people who have suffered in the way that I did, um, I can tell right away. And maybe that's everybody actually on some level, but I can have that, you know what I mean? I have access to that. And I
Yeah.
can see, I can hold space right where they are. Um, Even if the feelings and the grief present differently and the situations and the stories are different. Like, I see you is kind of how I feel. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that's that's our tagline, right? Like, "You are not alone, I see you."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's so powerful, especially in this area, in the area of loss, because it's not talked about. And as we are recording this, there's this rule in podcasting, don't date your podcasts. I throw that out the window, I don't care.
Yeah.
As we are recording this, it is Pregnancy, Infant, and Child Loss Awareness Month. Um, and the point, and I somebody stated it so beautifully today, and I'm gonna completely butcher it, but it's this month and these days are not to it's not like, "Oh, go." I mean, yes, check on your friends, right? Check on your
Sure.
friends who have experienced loss, but it's to normalize these conversations because this is reality. And it's just like you're saying, like, your roots go down so deep to this dark place, but you know that there are others out there who are looking to who maybe don't have their roots planted so firmly, and they need
Mhm.
someone, right? They need
Mhm.
someone to reach out and connect. And so you being so vulnerable, that is such a strength and that is such a gift. Um and I especially appreciate you walking us through the process as because there's someone out there right now who's being faced with this same decision, and we're not even going to get into how complicated it probably is now.
Yeah.
Um, but they need to know what that looks like. They need to
Yeah.
know what it feels like. They need to know what it sounds like. They need to know what to expect.
Yeah.
Because just like you said, like when you were trying to find out his diagnosis in the beginning, you're like, couldn't you just, what do you mean? Tell me what
Yeah.
this means.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You feel so helpless at the time. And there is such a deep need to be connected with other people going through something similar. And I did not have it at that time. So unfortunately, I then got to be that for other people in a beautiful way. And those people continue to find me over and
Yeah.
over again through word of mouth and neighborhoods and moms and all of the things. Uh, and But sometimes I find that's ends up being my path is like, no one's quite done this yet, so I'll just try. I'll just do this thing that's really hard. I got forced into the situation and here I am. And then I'll figure it out and I'll tell other people. And yeah, thank you for saying that.
I do, I really appreciate it, and I'm curious too, moving forward, how how did you approach talking like, your little one,
Mm,
she was a toddler,
yeah,
so there's only a certain extent to which she's gonna understand the whole thing.
yeah.
I'm assuming she knew you were pregnant?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So she was 2.5 at the time he passed. So it was of our utmost, our biggest question was how do we talk about this with her? So we were fortunate enough through our midwife to be connected to a child psychologist, which we had 2 sessions with her just to figure out how to go about talking to our oldest about it. And her suggestion was to keep it well, both of us really wanted it to be quite honest as possible, and to keep it very open, an open conversation that could continue to happen as long as anytime she needed to talk about him in the process. The psychologist's advice was to create something in her language that was very, very simple. So what we did was just make a little a book, and I put that in quotes, a book, which is a folded piece of paper
Yeah.
with a front, a cover, and like 2 pages on the inside and a back. And it was the story of Wilde. And it was just very, very simple terms. And it was like, we were pregnant. We were very happy. Mommy was pregnant. I was very happy to have this baby. We were all excited. We found out the baby was sick and couldn't make it. And, we were all sad, but he lives in our hearts or something like really simple. And so we presented that to her and talked about it with her. And then the idea with the book is that she can pull it out and bring it to us anytime she wants to talk about Wild and she's having feelings about it and doesn't know how to express it. We can read that book together and talk about it. And that gave her some power in the situation. And it's not like a one time conversation and then it's over. Um,
Yeah.
so that was really helpful. And we hung on to that really well, and kids are amazing, they just can process things in a way that sometimes adults cannot. And she was not sad. She was like very straightforward about it. Oh, so this happened. Oh, so and then this. Oh, okay. So where is he? Oh, okay. You know, they were very basic. She was very verbal at 2.5, but they were
Yeah.
very simple questions that were very logical, and, like, she went on about her afternoon, and didn't have a lot of emotion about it, but we continued to just we were having a lot of emotion that we didn't want to be hiding from her, so she comforted us at times, and we spread his ashes together, and we brought him up a lot in conversation, um and still to this day, that is something that is talked about in our family quite a lot. His name comes up a lot. If we see it out somewhere, a restaurant is named that, and we point it out, and oh, look, Wild.
Yeah.
So I'm I'm actually really happy about how that went. You know, yeah,
Yeah. I think that, like, just like you said, you met her where she was at and left the door open for her to talk about it again.
yeah,
Um, and I know, but listeners don't know, you did go on to have another child.
yeah,
How this is a difficult question to word. I don't wanna say, like, when did you make that decision? Um, what was the process like for you
yeah,
deciding to walk this path again?
yeah. Gosh, um, it's for me, I'll speak only for me because unfortunately, I have other friends who've been down a similar path and make quite different decisions, and it's so unique.
Mhm.
My desire to have something positive come out of this included the idea and the hope that I would have another child very quickly. And that was because I thought if I am pregnant right away, it kind of ensures that that child would not have happened had he been born, do you know?
Mm,
And I somehow that was comforting to me that like I would know that this new life was um was a bonus, you know? And so I was quite eager and I knew that pregnancy is a long time and I had quite a lot
Yeah.
of grieving left to do, but I wanted to be doing that while I was also like waiting for this new life. And my husband at the time was not as eager. He felt maybe that was too soon. But because he was like, what's the rush kind of thing? Like, we
Yeah.
should all process this. And that's also very valid. Um, in the end, I think we only waited, it was in August when he passed. And we began trying again at the end of the year. And by January, we were pregnant again. So it wasn't right away, but it was again quickly. That had not been something that was a struggle for us. And so then the journey of, being pregnant a third time with this behind me and with the first birth being quite, having a lot of complications and some small t traumas and as well. It was an anxiety-filled pregnancy, to say the least.
Yeah.
I'm not really a super anxious person, but that brought out every anxiety that I had, and, I just couldn't wait for it to be over,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy that one quite as much. I was just really ready to get this healthy baby into the world and, like, breathe again, basically. I had a real hang up about whether what the fascinatingly enough, what the gender of this child would be. Um, at the time, that meant something to me. That doesn't really mean anything to me now. But at the time, I was like, is this going to be another boy like I had lost? Or is this going to be a girl and that's different? And like, for me, my brain just was super hung up on that being like a really, not like one was better than the other, but they were different things in my mind to be, you know. Um, and so that was something. The gender of that child is not important, but, that was something that was really I for some reason, just kept getting stuck on. So, but the I did develop cholestasis, again with my youngest. That was something I knew to look for because it's quite common for it to repeat itself. And so I asked them to test me very early on, and then it started to get, the level started to go up a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. And I was just being monitored a lot in this pregnancy. What happened to Wild was a genetic fluke. It was not something to recur, but cholestasis is quite common. So it was my comfort level for a lot of reasons to induce at 37 weeks, knowing I'd already been diagnosed with cholestasis. The levels weren't that high, weren't that urgent, but I was ready to have this baby. And not something that like I would recommend to a lot of my clients. Is not really something that is like, okay, at 37 weeks, you should just induce your baby. But I was like, this is my comfort level. Um, and yeah, I had an induction and had a vaginal delivery, had a feedback with that baby, and they were completely healthy, actually quite like robust and healthy for a 37-week-old. And the story of the VBAC was also an induction, right? So also this long process and Pitocin and all of these things. And I had a doula, birth doula, and I was in the hospital, and it was a real fiery, animalistic birth. Was I was like operating completely out of passion and like in my body and a determination to do this the way that I really wanted to do this and feel the pain and feel the ring of fire and all of the things. And I did that and I did that and I had them vaginally. And once they were here, everything really calmed down. And I could let go of the anxiety and I could see my baby and feed my baby and kind of enter into this next stage, which included more grieving, but still was like
Yeah.
an exhale and knew I was done having children and, all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. That is, uh, Like, I'm speechless right now. Well, it doesn't happen often, but just to hear obviously, not obviously, the anxiety that you felt throughout your pregnancy
Yeah.
must have been overwhelming, and I can absolutely understand wanting, like, I just want him. I want them to
Yeah.
be here. I just want
Yeah.
them to be here. Um, and you talk about grieving continuing after bringing baby home.
Yeah.
What did that look like for you? What, cuz so you're postpartum and you're dealing with all of the normal postpartum changes and hormones, and you've got 2 kids now. Well, you have 3
Yeah.
kids, but you have 2
Yeah.
kids at home with you.
Yeah.
Um, how did grieving transform in that?
Well, I want to say that in the year, basically 1 year from Wilde to my youngest was I had a lot of support. I had the privilege to be in therapy. I was in it with an individual therapist, not the child psychologist, but somebody that she referred, and, um, that woman con continued to be my therapist off and on for the last 10 years, is now a guest on my podcast, which we could talk about later, but, like, really kind of cool first full circle. I had so much support in that regard, and so I was really able to do some good healing, deep healing with her, um, grief counseling or whatever you want to call it at the time. But I, and I was in a support group for parents who had had different kinds of infant and perinatal losses. And so I was well supported. My partner was very supportive of me being able to get to all of those things, which was hard, and financially to be able to make that happen. So I wanna say that because I have a good chunk of it under my belt already when my youngest came along. Um, I feel like my postpartum at that point was a blur. Um,
Yeah.
it was chaos and, but joy and just I didn't adjust to 2 children very well. I found the transition from 0 to 1 to be very easy, the transition from 1 to 2 to be very difficult. And I find that some people are either in one camp or the other.
I'm in your
Uh,
camp.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
It is really challenging. This,
Yes.
like, first child needs, second child needs, and then the dynamic of the 2 of them being at conflict and not leaving any room for my personal needs, I found to be way more overwhelming than I ever thought. And there are things that I still struggle with, today, and my kids are much older. Yeah, it was, it was a lot. I continued to honor Wild through my youngest. They also know about him, talk about him. That child has a lot of access to the supernatural, I wanna say. There's a
Wow.
lot of mentions of wild and also past pets that we had that passed before they were born, and, like, a lot of things that, uh, kinda make me smile, honestly, when they bring it up.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so that became a part of the story of, like, how you got here. Wild made room for you and carved the path for you, and I don't know how they feel about that, honestly. It we honor his birthday. It's different every year. I have different feelings every year on his birthday. Sometimes I write, sometimes I light a candle, sometimes I don't wanna talk to anybody. Some days I forget. Some years I forget.
Yeah.
It's like it's a real roller coaster, but it is an access point, I feel like, on his birthday to come back to him and to at least put some attention there. Um, yeah,
Yeah. I'm so glad that you talked about the range of just not only feelings, but just what you experience yourself and as a family, because it's
yeah,
all valid, right? Like you said,
yeah,
sometimes I forget, sometimes, and that's okay. It
yeah,
doesn't it doesn't take away the love for Wild or your other children. It doesn't take away the grief. It just means that that's how it manifested that at that point.
yeah,
And it's all real and it's all valid and it's all okay. So you've spoken so beautifully. I know we kind of rushed through all 3 of your children's stories and your story, but you've taken the time that we've had and you've given so much. Like, I truly do. I feel so thankful to have been able to sit in this with you and to learn and to experience what I experienced, with the dragonfly thing. Um,
Yeah.
but, um, so I kinda wanna transition us into what it is you're doing now and, like, how your experiences may have shaped how you work with moms and families.
Yeah. I so now I work as a postpartum doula, as I mentioned, and that work found me. I've been in the film industry for a long time as a director, filmmaker, producer, and in the last couple of years, my I just turned and looked at what was calling me, and this is the work that was calling me. I thought that I would do birth work, and instead I fell in love with the postpartum period, and I really love and am so honored by the ability to step into someone's home and to really sit with them in that less I don't know. The birth is like a little bit like a wedding, right? And it's like flashy and there's all kinds of things.
Yes.
And this postpartum period is murky and it's confusing and sometimes chaotic and sometimes very scary and a wide range, as you know, and that, with and without PMADs and perinatal mental health disorders, like it's murky, right?
Yeah.
So to be able to like be there with someone and honor all of what's going on is just so beautiful. And I am so filled with passion for the work that I do, for people being able to like be seen in postpartum and to be heard. And um, I always say that, and I stole this from somebody else, so it's not my phrase, but like that all postpartum work is grief work. There is so
Mhm.
much grief in processing the birth that you had versus the birth that you wanted, the feeding experience that you're having versus the feeding experience you might have imagined, your relationship changing, you have a loss of identity, you have so much loss, and that is not talked about with a healthy child and a healthy
Right.
parent. Even in those situations, there's loss. So sometimes I'm really just asking questions and shining a light on what may be under the surface, and physically and emotionally supporting these families. So that is. It's a gift to me to be able to do that work as long as I end up doing it. Um, and what I've done is, I've started to build a course to help families be intentional about their postpartum experience. And so I teach people, either one-on-one or in small groups about what may or may not change in your relationship, what may not change for you personally, and how to let go of some of the um, identity that you have now and kind of prepare yourself to cross the threshold into parenthood, and then how to be able to navigate the uncertainties, the discomfort, and the loss that can be there. Joy and loss, joy and grief can coexist in the same moment.
Yes.
So, yeah, that is what I do right now, and it's lovely.
Yeah, and it does sound like you found your calling. It sounds like the culmination of that caretaker side of you, that go-getter side of you, that, just the mother in you, just kind of led you to where you are. Like I said, I am all about the doulas and the postpartum doulas, but you in particular, like, in learning about you and in meeting you today, like,
Mm.
this you seem to be like, totally stepping into your power, like, these families
Oh.
are so lucky to have you in their corner.
Oh, thank
Um,
you. Yeah, thank you. My own personal experiences, needed to happen in the way they did, and that I needed to have a lot of space between that time and helping
yes.
people because, like we talked about with nannying and having your own children, right? There needed to be like a cocooning of space for me to process even. A lot of people say postpartum goes up to 7 years, right? So, I needed my children to be in that range before
Yeah.
I did this, but yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I want to give you the opportunity to let listeners know, especially if they want to learn more about you, if they want to learn more about what you're doing. These will all be listed in your show notes, but where is the best place for them to find you and what you're up to?
Sure. Well, yeah. So I also co-host a podcast. So it's really wonderful when people, if they've enjoyed this and they want to hear more from me and my partner. We co-host a podcast called Beauty in the Break, and it's all about life's breaking moments and how we find beauty in them and on the other side of them. So they're personal stories of resilience. He's had quite a lot of experiences in his life that are even hard to fathom, and in addition to all of this that I've experienced, there's quite a lot of stories we have, but we also have guests on as well telling, their own perspectives on things like that. And it's been really joyous and beautiful to share space with my partner. So people can find me there. It's on all podcast platforms. And then to connect with me directly through my website, fosterwilson.com. There's more information about my doula services. I also came out with a book of poetry last year called Afternoon Abundance, Poetry for Wild Souls.
It's
And
on
so
my
there's,
list.
yeah, oh,
Yeah.
thank you. There is a lot in that book about parenthood, motherhood, grief, loss, and also identity. And it feels like um, it tracks this idea of digging really deep into a dark place and coming out on the other side and finding the light, but maintaining those deep roots that we talked about. And
Yeah.
so that's available on my website and on all of the major, booksellers and whatnot. But yeah, fosterwilson.com. And you can reach out to me directly. I love a direct email or, voice note. I'm all about the voice notes.
I'm
Please.
learning. I'm learning to
Yes.
get on board with the voice note on
Uh,
board with the voice notes.
my favorite mode of communication. You get to hear somebody's like tone, which is
It's
so lost these
true.
days. So
Ugh,
I
it's
appreciate it.
true. I just can't
Hmm.
I can't text is my love language, but I'm
Yeah.
learning and I'm trying, I'm
Yeah.
growing. I'm
Totally.
getting
Yeah.
there. Thank you for sharing that. Your book of poetry is on my list. I say that
Oh, so sweet.
I have a list a mile long, but I'm gonna get to all of them.
Yes.
Um, and yes, your podcast will be linked, and
Thank
it
you.
that is now on my list as well, now that I
Thank
know it
you.
exists.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so what I'm in the vein of, I guess, like, voice notes and text messages, that's ironic.
Huh? Uh-huh.
I'm doing something a little different with the end of my podcasts now.
Okay.
What I'm doing is I'm asking us to kick it back to the days before voice notes, before text messages, when all we had was a landline. And if you wanted someone to know you called, you had to leave a message. So you don't know who my next guest is going to be. You don't know anything about them or their story, but you called Quiet Connection today and they weren't here
Mhm.
to answer. See, you are gonna leave them a message, and you can interpret that in whatever way feels right to you,
Okay. Okay. Here goes.
okay?
Hello, it is so good for you to be here. And I am so glad you're on the show. And I just have to tell you, you're rad and your story matters. And I am here to listen. So please speak up and take up space because we are all here to listen to you.
Oh my god, I love that so much. What no, I do. What's been so fun about this is that every response has been so wildly different, and you're the first one who has brought so much energy into it, and I love it. I love it so much. Um So you're gonna have to come back and listen to the episode before yours to get your message and see if it
Yes.
resonates.
How fun.
Yeah, it's a little I don't know, I'm trying something. We're
I
seeing how
love
it
that.
goes.
I love creativity in
Well,
podcasting. It's my favorite.
I'm trying. We'll see how it goes. But Foster, thank you so, so, so much for sharing space with me, sharing your story with me, sharing Wild with me. And yeah, I'm just I'm so thankful that we connected.
Thank you, Chelsea. I appreciate you having this space. It's so important and vital that we all have a place to be able to hear these stories, and you're doing incredible work. So I salute you.
Thank you so much. Foster, thank you for sharing your story and for allowing us to meet Wilde through your words. Your openness, compassion, and strength are gifts, not just to the families you support, but to everyone who hears your story. If this episode resonated with you, please subscribe to Quiet Connection Postpartum Mental Health Podcast. Leave us a review and share it with someone who may need to hear it. You can follow us on social media for more stories and resources, or visit quietconnectionpodcast.com to learn even more. And if you'd like to share your story, send me an email. Join us next time when another story is told and you realize you are not alone. I see you. Hey, it's Chelsea. I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for tuning in and being a part of the Quiet Connection community. Did you know that you can support me and gain exclusive perks by subscribing to my Patreon account? By becoming a subscriber, you'll get access to bonus episodes, ad-free listening, exclusive chats, and even monthly goodies in the mail handmade by me. Your support helps me continue creating high-quality content and ensures that we keep spreading awareness and ending the stigma surrounding perinatal mood and anxiety disorders and so much more. Head on over to Patreon, search Quiet Connection Podcast, and join the community of listeners who are helping me make this podcast the best it can be.